Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to City Hall for tonight's special Committee of the Whole meeting. This meeting is called to order. Our recording secretary and deputy clerk tonight is Stephanie Dawkins. Let the record show that all the council members are present. Folks, before we begin our business this evening, I would like to ask for your indulgence. All of us, I know, are aware of our former colleague and, of course, our friend Dave Morris, who worked for the city for 30 years, passed away, and they celebrated his life last week. I saw many of you there, of course, and the flag was lowered to honor Dave's service to our community, and I asked his wife if I could also begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence, and she, of course, said that would be lovely. For those of you who knew Mr. Morris, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic here, he was a very unassuming guy, very unassuming. Mr. Babbitt, I'm sure you would agree with that. He was also funnier than heck, and he was an extraordinarily valuable member of the Public Works team as a engineering tech. He loved fishing more than anything. He loved being away from, dare I say, the city and all the challenges it presented over a 30-year career. And sadly, he passed away just 2 years after his retirement. So with that, if you would, just join me in a moment of silence to recognize not just Dave's contributions to our community, but to let his family know that we're thinking about them. And also on a sad note, the flags, the U.S. flags, of course, are at half-staff for the servicemen and women who were killed last week in Afghanistan. And as all of you know, being good stewards of history, today ended the longest war in U.S. history. Almost 2,500 troops killed during that 19-year engagement. But in particular, the 13 who were lost last week doing what I think all of us would agree is good humanitarian work. We also pause just for a moment to recognize their contributions. A very difficult time, of course, for everyone. For those of you interested, tomorrow night at 6:30, there will be a laying of the wreath at American Legion Post 75. Certainly I will be there to honor and recognize with our good friends from the Legion. So, thank you, everyone. Folks, we have one item of business this evening, and that is the presentation on the City of Geneva's Facilities Assessment. Stephanie, do you want to provide any sort of preamble to this, or?
No, but I would like to at least introduce our speaker. I guess in a short preamble, you'll recall we engaged the services of Studio GC to do a facilities assessment. And this evening with us, we have Craig Meadows, and I'm just going to let him take it from there.
How you doing, Craig?
I'm good, sir. How are you today?
Good, welcome. We just, let me just double check. Yeah, 43,000 people tuning in, so
I'm
good luck.
excited.
Yeah.
I'm sure my wife's one of them too, so.
No, she said good luck and hung up.
Fair enough. So let me pull up the presentation and then I'll kind of get things going.
And we're going to let you go through this presentation, and then
Okay.
we will entertain questions or comments from the dais following your presentation.
Fair enough. That works for
Sound
me. All right, well, as mentioned before, my name is Craig Meadows. I'm with Studio GC. We're an architecture firm that is located in Chicago, but we do a lot of municipal libraries, school works across the entire kind of collar counties and areas around Chicago. Some of you may recognize me. I was here a number of years ago presenting for the new library building. So now that that is off my plate mostly, I'm kind of back at other work as well. So
Mostly?
mostly. Well, are things ever done?
I understand.
Yeah. So we were engaged back in about 2019. So as I joked earlier today when we were talking about it, one pandemic ago, our goal was to evaluate and to assess the condition of all of the facilities as a departure point or a beginning point for future discussions about how to address those concerns. So our agenda tonight is, let me make sure it's doing that, is to go over the condition of everything in your, not everything, but the condition of all of your facilities. Today is to discuss kind of the deficiencies and options and give you a 50,000 square foot or a 50,000-foot elevation, so you're kind of looking outside the window at the lay of the land below. We're not going to go into too deep details, but I will give you some examples. This is a preface that in the next couple of weeks you will be getting a detailed packet that contains information about each and every building and the conditions they're in on that. So part of this is just to help you understand how to work through that, and I'm happy to entertain questions at the end. So today I'll give you a little bit of an understanding to make sure we're all on the same page about what facilities you have. We'll be talking about detailed building assessments of each of the elements you see there, and then some general marks and then next steps. So throughout the assessment and on this process, we did a number of things. We were engaged to bring in and walk through each building. We created 3D models of each and every building in your inventory. We then utilized that information to make sure we understood the exact numbers of square footage of carpet, flooring, tiles, the number of lights, the number of mechanical units, and all sorts of stuff that you have. We also brought in engineers and experts to have discussions and review the current state of the mechanical infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and plumbing, et cetera. We then embarked on a process of interviewing and reviewing the conditions with the staff to make sure we understand what their pain points were and what there were. And I want to make it very clear on one point. A lot of times that's about pulling teeth because people are very used to the world they're living in. So they may not be aware or know the things that they're having to make kind of sacrifices on from an operational perspective. So we heard a lot of the mechanical unit is not working, this is failing, that sort of stuff, which is important, and we were able to figure that out. But we also dove into security and operational concerns as well. So throughout that process, then we were able to take this information and develop this little chart you see up on the side there. This is a one-stop glimpse at the kind of the status of things. This is a lot like you would find. Red implies that there are some significant concerns or issues that you need to address as you move forward. Yellow is kind of a warning light that you're nearing the end of the useful life of elements, or there's some other concerns that are not urgent but are rising to the top. And green generally means things are actually pretty good, that they're aging as they would expect, and that you're kind of doing the things you should be doing to be able to keep up with that. Each of those elements are the ones that we'll be talking about today, so overall condition. So what we mean by terminology is how long things last. So what that means is what is the end of the useful life, so that's kind of like the longevity. There are things that we expect to die after a certain period of time. They may last a few years longer due to good maintenance and sometimes just luck, but we kind of put a date on when we think things are going to end. We look at operational concerns. Are there things in the building that are impacting your ability to operate efficiently and effectively as a staff and as a city? Do you have the proper and current security items and elements in these buildings to make sure that your staff and public are safe in each one of those? Do you meet current accessibility guidelines / laws in regards to ADA? And then we did a zoning and code review, looking at life safety elements and what is the potential of expansion or changes to the facilities to accommodate future need. The last one on this list was not an item that was in our original scope of work, but we threw it in there anyway because it came apart as an operational discussion. So we thought it warranted a separate topic. So those are pandemic concerns. Are those things that we realized as a group over the past year about things that are important that may change how we perceive how we need to use the building and how we operate those buildings? So the first things first, we need to define our terms and make sure everybody understands the number of buildings and about where they have and where they're located. I'm on the school board in the Batavia School District, and they did the same thing for me the first time, is where everything is and everything, because there's a lot of facilities to keep track of. So you'll see right there in the middle in the heart of Geneva is the City Hall and the police station. Those are the star and the diamond shape. Public Works is the lightning bolt. The two crosses are the two fire stations and the police station, and then the two fire stations, and then the two blue dots are wastewater on the right and water treatment on the left. So you guys, your operation, your facilities are spread across the city. That's generally a good idea. You want to be able to kind of cover your bases, particularly as it relates to the fire activities. You want to cover each end because as a person who lives on the other side of Randall Road, it's sometimes kind of hard to get all the way over there and across it. So your facilities are all generally located about where we would expect them to be, close to it. There are some concerns about the police being right in the middle of downtown of an accessibility to get to outside areas. So what is your facility inventory? City Hall is about 108 years old. And keep in mind, what I'm looking for is what is your infrastructure? What is the base? There have been renovations, a little bit of a stint in 1928, and then about every 10 years or so from 1987 on to 2009. A little bit of a break since then. Police station, the root part of the building, the old kind of fire station / garage, is 106 years old. Much of the structure from the bowstring trusses and everything else that there are 106 years old. Those have had subsequent renovations, with the most recent one being in 2002, which gave it kind of the front face off the parking lot that you see today. Public Works is 35 years old. There was an addition in 1997 that added some training areas and a few extra spaces. Fire Station 1 is 19 years old. Fire Station 2 is 28 years old, which surprised a number of people. Water treatment, a building I drive past about, it seems, 3 times a day, is 12 years old. And wastewater, the heart of the building, is 88 years old. So from a statistics perspective, you have 174,000 square feet under roof. A big chunk of that is the Public Works garage section, but the rest is not inconsequential. It's a lot of area and a lot of space that you need to keep track of. Average age of the buildings is 56 years old. So if you're looking at an age of a building that when someone comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to build a school, or I'd like to build an XYZ building, I want it to be a municipal level building, which means usually I want it to last a minimum of 50 years. You are kind of already at that with your average inventory of buildings. However, there are 4 that are under 50, to acknowledge that, but there are 3 that are 80 plus years old, and 2 of them are over 100. That has positives and negatives. It's great that the City Hall is an old building and it looks as good as it does, but negatives that we'll discuss in a bit about you have to maintain a building that's that old. One of the things that we were finding, and this kind of talks about why we're here tonight, these are the list of the service calls that have kind of happened in the past 2 or 3 weeks. So there was an HVAC, a water leak of a pump that failed in the City Hall building, dropped water all over a bunch of records that needed to be dried out. That took up a meeting room to take care of that. Elevator at the fire station had a problem. Condenser at Public Works. Just found out today there's a refrigerant line leak at the Public Works that's going to affect the other half of the building at some point. And then most troubling all, frankly, there was a generator failure during a power outage at the police department. And just to be clear, that generator picks up the infrastructure for your entire municipality. So for those couple of hours or however long it was, phones didn't work, schools didn't have internet, no communications, all sorts of other stuff occurred. That generator in and of itself is probably, I think it was 35 or 40 years old. It is significantly old for a unit. So as we go into the overall facility conditions, the goal today is to understand your current situation. We're not here to review solutions to the issues. So the example I'd like to say is when I was looking at giving my kids my car, before I gave it to them, I looked and said, hey, this one likes to go outdoors. He likes to go on trips to mountains and everything else. I need to figure out if my car's going to last that long to be able to let him do those trips safely and to meet his needs. That's what we're doing today. We're just evaluating the car. Are things good for what you need to do? So as you move forward on deciding how you want to best solve these problems, you understand the conditions you're at. The other thing I want to make sure is very well known. Sometimes what comes out of these situations and these reviews is people are looking at it going, oh my gosh, there's a lot to deal with. Why aren't people taking care of things? I'm going to tell you right now, the facilities and the staff here at the city take exceptional care of their buildings. The things they're facing is age of the buildings and resources available to it. Things in the buildings are starting to fail faster and faster and faster, as indicated by the 2 weeks, and it gets difficult for them to keep up on top of doing their other work. 75% of these building elements, and when we looked at it, we looked at everything, have either reached the end of their useful life or expected to in the next 5 years. And then in the end, it's a zero-sum game. You have a certain amount of staff time, you have aging facilities, and you only have so many resources to take care of it. So to a certain extent, you guys are kind of in what I call triage mode. Urgent issues pop up, you take care of those, and sometimes you have to move less urgent issues until you can get to them later on. But the staff here is doing an exceptional job. A lot of times I come in here talking about a lot of deferred maintenance that people have just been ignoring and hoping goes away, and that's not the situation here. So as I mentioned before, we created these little charts. So the first thing I want to look at is the overall facility conditions. So from a site elements, what we're looking at are things outside of the building. What is the paving like? What was the sidewalks? What were the conditions of the sidewalks? Utilities, stormwater, et cetera. One of the examples on the site elements is why the police station in particular has red is on the bond out side of the building. It regularly floods. They can't actually use the bond out components of their building because of that. On the exterior envelope side, we're looking at literally what we mean is the skin of the building. So windows, walls, roofs, foundations, exterior doors, that sort of stuff. On the City Hall side, there's some concerns about old leaky windows, drafty airs, conditions at the outside the outside walls being too cold for people to operate effectively and do their work. Interior elements, that's like carpet, floors, ceilings, that sort of stuff. What are the conditions of those? And then infrastructure is primarily plumbing, mechanical, electrical, lighting, communications, those elements. So as you can see here, for example, the City Hall, that's pretty good from a site element perspective. Everything outside of the building's in good condition. Exterior envelope has some problems. It needs some acute attention. And interior elements, mostly due to the renovations, have been kept up fairly well, and they're aging as one would expect. But they're getting a little long in the tooth, so that might need to be considered in the future. So some specific examples: police station, City Hall, Public Works, and wastewater treatment. Effectively, those are effectively your kind of older buildings in your inventory. Exterior structure, infrastructure are all showing significant deterioration and wear and tear. City Hall's HVAC system, as I mentioned before, has regular failures, which includes leaks and damage to elements and loss of staff efficiencies in dealing with those. The HVAC system also, because it can't keep up in a lot of cases, creates pockets of too hot, too cold, uncomfortableness for people trying to do work. Fire Station 2, this is an interesting one. So while Fire Station 2 is 28 years old, it's not constructed in a means like you would normally see for a municipal building. It's effectively constructed like a very large house. So it's wood-framed walls. Yes, there's brick on the outside, but it's not block or some sort of structure. There's wood trusses on the roof. The HVAC system is doing the best it can, but it's a little bit on the aged side, not what we would do. But the thing to note, particularly about police, fire, and both fire stations, and to a certain extent Public Works and others, is the operational use of those facilities is very hard on the operations of that building. So things tend to wear out faster because they're there 24/7. So they go out on a call, and every fire department on earth likes when they come back on a call, they're all geared up. They want that building as cold as they can get so they can cool off as fast as they can get. That puts undue wear and tear on those HVAC components. And then wastewater treatment, fire station, while both of those are aging, they're kind of aging as they should expect. And while there may be escalation, it's not outside of the realm of what you're having. They're aging as one would anticipate. And frankly, I'll tell you, water treatment's actually aging a little better than I would have expected for its age. Oops, I already did that one. Overall facility operations. So the operations side, we're looking at how does the building impact staff? Are the staff able to function at a level of efficiency so they can be efficient, so that you don't have to hire staff that's doing more work because they're busy accommodating other needs? So are there spaces for staff collaboration? Are those spaces big enough? Are the offices big enough for them to do what they need to do in them? Is there adequate workspace for staff? Is there growth potential? Are there efficient workflows? Departmental proximity is directly related to that. So are departments between them near each other so they can do their work effectively? And staff training, meeting spaces, that's all paramount. I've been in this building particularly a number of times, and I probably have had more meetings in this room trying to collaborate and talk with staff, which is not the exact environment you want to be able to do that in. So we go in there, but it's not quite big enough for everybody in the department to talk, and neither is any other space in there. So it's just something to be considered as you move forward. So as I said before, and it's really important, the police station does not have adequate space to meet current policing needs. I'm personally working on 2 police stations right now, and one of the biggest things that we've seen, even in the past 3 years, is a significant uptake, not only because of the statutory and state requirements on policing, but an increased need for better and different detective agency spaces, that they have conference rooms they need, they have computer forensics, they have elements that they need that are not in this current facility right now. Effectively, what they have is a series of desks in a space and a little bit of layout space, but not enough to meet the current policing needs. The thing that this does is it requires the police need to use excessive caution and more diligence to make sure they do not violate the constitutional rights of anyone that's working there or anybody under investigation. So for instance, the detention area, they need to make sure they're monitored because there aren't cameras everywhere there needs to be to meet current requirements. City Hall, for lack of a better term, is a warren of departmental spaces. Staff are spread too far apart, and there's not enough meeting room and conference room space to perform collaboration as mandated due to staff time. What I primarily mean is, for example, building departments up here, historic preservation's over there, economic develops over here, the admin's over here, and worst comes to worst, finance is all the way across the street. So for anybody to meet, they're walking from everywhere to get to that, as opposed to being in a communal area to work together. Fire Station 1 and 2, though 1 is a much better situation than 2, are not constructed to meet the growing needs of women firefighters. Additionally, Station 2 does not meet the needs for privacy for the wellness of the firefighters. What I mean by that is they were both constructed at a time when that was not a primary concern, but it is now. So it's something that needs to be addressed as any renovations or any elements move forward. The other thing that's not written here is that the kind of org chart for firefighters and the fire department changes over time, and there's battalion chiefs that need specialized space in each building that they don't have currently. At least over at Fire Station 2, they do not. Water treatment training area is a nice addition. It works well, and I understand why it was added at the time, but it's a little underutilized because it's in, as you saw in the earlier map, it's way at the other end of the city. So it's difficult for staff to get over there. Additionally, because of that building's security needs, because it's the water treatment for the entire city, you can't just let people wander in and out of there, so it reduces the operational effectiveness of using that as a training center. Facility security. As you can imagine, this is one of the more important things everybody's discussing today. One of the elements that we're continually looking at as it relates to security is simple. Some areas, like the police, value security, rightfully so, over transparency and openness to the public. That needs to occur because of the work they do. But we recognize that a conversation needs to continue moving forward with Public Works, definitely City Hall, Finance, and others. How do you balance security with openness in your relationship to the public? So what we look at, though, is just on a pragmatic level. So from a secure site area, what is the security of the site? For example, the police has a red in there because there is no secure perimeter around the site. The police staff and their personal cars and their squads are all parking in the same area with the public and actually intermixing with them. That's not current needs and that's not current practices. Do you have a secure building perimeter? Are there access control to get into the building? Then within the building, are there defensible spaces? So one of the examples I've used in the past is when we're designing current city halls, and I'm going to use this because we're all sitting here right now, if someone was to come in a door here, how are we defending them? How are we slowing someone down? How are you guys in your positions capable of defending yourselves? Like what we've done in the past is put kind of bullet resistant sheathing on the front of the dais so you could at least get down and have a door you could sneak out. So you can protect yourselves and do that. That is difficult in this building the way it is right now. What securities do you have from visitors and with visitors as they come into the building? What visibility do you have with your cameras in the building and outside of the building? And what is your internal access control? So that if somebody gets in, are you able to keep them from going from space to space to space? Or how do you make sure that people don't go into spaces they shouldn't be? So for example, at the police station, if you need to keep certain areas accessible only to certain people, and they are doing that, but it's kind of old-fashioned with keys and other elements. So how do you maintain that security level? Water treatment's a great example of doing pretty much everything correctly. Just once you get past a certain door in water treatment, it's kind of open to everybody, wherever you get in there. But they have such good protections on the outside, that's not really a significant concern. So as I said before, police and City Hall and Finance do not have any real level of site security. Fire station and water treatment do meet current concepts for access and visibility from exterior and interior spaces. Wastewater is unique as they consider the entire site their secure perimeter, which is in fact correct when the gate's closed. Once you get in, and I've seen a couple of times when I was there walking around, people go down to walk the path, they go left instead of right, and they end up in the wastewater area. So now I know they're keeping that closed more often because we had a specific discussion about that. But there's also a gate off of Route 25 with direct access that is just a padlock and a chain link there. So there's no, like if somebody goes over there and cuts that open, nobody has any idea, probably for months, that occurred. All facilities really need a consolidated security control system. So up until now, I've been talking building to building to building. But from a security perspective, you have to look at the total campus. So you really need a consolidated security control system. What this does is it allows proper authorization, one person to kind of push the button to say we need to go on lockdown, and that happens at all the facilities. Then each facility with operation guidelines can begin to release their level of security and if there is no need or if they need to get out or something along that lines. And then additionally, police and fire should really have access to camera systems at each facility to allow for remote monitoring and supervision in case there's a situation. There's actually one of the police departments I'm working with right now is working with local businesses to get access to their cameras as well. So that's kind of an ongoing trend that we're seeing in the market, so that the police get better visibility across the entire city as a whole. Facility accessibility. So as I mentioned before, what this means is it relates to the American Disabilities Act, so ADA. Just to make it clear, people like to call it a guideline, it's a law. If I don't make sure that you meet accessibility when I build a building like the library, I, in theory, could go to jail. Not just lose my license, not all sorts of other stuff, or at least open people up to significant financial issues and liability concerns. So what we looked at is basically as it relates to current accessibility. There is a concept of grandfathering. The building is so old that it is technically infeasible to, or I think the technical term is structurally infeasible to upgrade it, and you usually need to do a certain amount of renovation work to cause that to happen. However, we have heard, and it's been rumblings for the past couple of years, that your horizon on that grandfather may be waning, because this has been in act since about 1970 or so, and U.S. Attorney General's Department is considering saying, well, you've had enough time to get yourself in order, so you may need to allow yourself to get there and hurry. That has not been enacted into a law or anything else. We've just been hearing it, and so we're encouraging a lot of our clients to kind of go ahead and start taking the necessary steps. Some of your buildings are a little bit more difficult to pull that off on, this building being one of them. Frankly, wastewater treatment is probably nearly impossible to pull that off on because of the myriad levels associated with it. But the thing I want to make sure is this isn't also about public, this is about staff. So for instance, on the Public Works facility, access between levels is red because there's a mezzanine up on that area. So with no elevator to get to that mezzanine, you're effectively telling a staff person, I can't hire you or I can't get you to do that work because I don't have a way for you to get up to that level to do your job. That is technically a problem. So I'm a lot more fun than this usually. I'm very doom and gloom today, but just work with me here. And so then what is the public interaction? Do you have locations and places for to interact with the public? Can they get to the spaces they need to? We know in a particular instance, this level is very difficult for everybody to get to for meetings. So the City Hall has no public access for the City Council room and chambers, which really, because people don't need to tell you that they want to come to the meeting in advance, you have a potential Open Meetings Act issue associated with that. Now, I think a lot of people that do come will let you know in advance because it's a great city, everybody talks, but you need to make sure that the chairlift, which is not technically the proper way of doing it and not in keeping with the law/code, people allow you to do it because you're effectively grandfathered. And I know you guys do, as you know, move meetings to places as you know, so you're doing what you need to do, but it's just it's something to be aware of. Police station is non-compliant for toilet rooms, corridor width, door approach, casework design, signage, yada, 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 yada. It's a warren of a building. There's a lot of little levels to go up and down a little bit in. There is an elevator that gets you between two floors, which is a good step. So that one got a yellow for that, but it's problematic inside the building. Wastewater is really non-compliant completely. It was just oddly renovated over time. And so I don't even have an idea about how, even though today I said there's no solutions, I'm always trying to noodle things through about that. There's no real good way because if anybody's been to the Winchester Mystery House in California, you go up and down to get to levels and you go backwards and you go forwards. It's a little bit of a mess, which makes it difficult for an ADA. Public Works has no ADA compliant counter at the main entry, and there's some issues with what's called door approach. You have to have a certain amount of space beside a door so a person in a wheelchair or in a walker can open the door without getting the wheelchair or walker from getting in the way of opening it. And because it's the newest building in your inventory and it's done post-ADA, water treatment is compliant. The one thing we did note with them, though it's fine and they're continuing to carry on, is to keep an eye on the permeable pavers that are out there. Those over time can get a little loose on people. And so we want to make sure that you're on top of getting those, put more gravel in it and keep them compacted and everything else. Facility zoning and code. So just to help you understand, buildings are evaluated per code for the year that they're built, technically when they're permitted, but the year that they're built. All of your buildings are older. Some of your buildings even are older than most conceptions of actual code. So what we're looking at when we evaluate it based on code is two-part. We're looking at it to see what's the life safety implications of the buildings and occupants. Did the building, even though it was grandfathered, should it have a sprinkler system to be the size that it is? Do you have the egress routes and the distances that you need? Do I have an exit and an exit out of this space? In the most part, you're actually in good shape. Yellow, so that's red if there's a big problem. Yellow indicates that there are some things that you need to keep an eye on, but there's nothing urgent to deal with. The second part that we look at is zoning, and that's why some of these have tipped into red. We're looking at that, are there zoning implications? Is that landscaping issues where you don't meet your own landscaping ordinance? I know it doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's really important. Or do you meet your parking ordinance? Now, most of your facilities are public facilities, so generally speaking, there's not a one parking space per 500 square feet requirement. You just need to recognize that you're gonna have a couple hundred people in here, and do you have parking to handle that as needed, whether that's local or outside? And then do you have potentials for additions that make sense? And do you meet, again, the generalized life safety end of current code? So City Hall, Police, and Fire Station 1 have minimal to no potential for expansion. Oddly enough, the City Hall kind of does, but to do an expansion, you're covering up all of the historic components of City Hall, because you could go that way and you could go this way. You can't go backwards, and you can't really go to the library. So you kind of run into a challenge associated with kind of the perception of doing that. So we kind of downgraded that just because of that. Police station and fire stations, from a code perspective, in current code would be considered critical facilities, which means they would need a storm shelter. That's a specifically hardened, like effectively a tornado shelter, but it's a general term, to let people within those buildings get to a safe space to ride out the storm. This is really important to note because fire station number 1 is your emergency operations center for the entire city. So while at the time it was designed, it was not a requirement. It's something to think about as you're moving forward with designs and renovations. Wastewater is limited in expansion by site circulation. There's a lot going around on that site, big vehicles turning, so it limits where the building can go and the size of the building. It's not optimally located, and it has other expansion issues about just how it's literally constructed. But also, at the one great spot that you could potentially expand to, there's a pond that has, I usually walk into these buildings and I ask anybody when I'm talking about additions and expansions, I ask, what's the sacred cow? Like, for this building, it's landscape, it's the front of the building, it's the historic elements. At that building, it was that pond. Nobody wants to touch it, nobody even wants to, it was like, no, we're not even gonna talk about it. So it's just that important to those that are there and the history around in that site. Water treatment has good potential expansion. It's a great site, it's big, but frankly, the building was also built to serve future needs. The building was kind of built to address future concerns. So it's safeguarded against needing to do additions in the future, but there's capacity for that if necessary. And then the last topic to look at on these assessments is, what are our pandemic concerns? So as I mentioned before, these are elements that weren't really in our scope of work, but one thing we've been finding ourselves talking about, particularly with police and fire more and more often. Is there spaces for social distancing? Can a couple of people go sit in an office and get far enough apart that they can talk, potentially take off masks if they need to, so they can have a clear and concise conversation? But, for example, at City Hall, all the offices are just a little too small to be able to do that. So you then gotta go into a conference room, and there's only a limited number of conference rooms to work with. And you can only fit about 3 or 4 people in a room about that size over there. So it makes the operational concerns of those facilities even worse. What is the public and staff interaction? The 2 little asterisks that are there really are just saying that wastewater and water treatment don't have a lot of public interaction. So while they might be green, it's kind of a misleading green because they don't really get a lot of public interaction there, so they fare fairly well. As I mentioned, our room capacity is of sufficient size to be able to do this, because as we have come to understand, just airflow in the spaces and giving enough space around people to let the virus effectively dilute itself across the air is important. And then lastly, mechanical and outside air. Do the mechanical systems in the building do things that offset that lack of space? Is it actively cleaning? Are you introducing enough outside air? One of the things we're doing with schools is more and more back to, I'd like to open a window, which for the past 20 plus years, like mechanical engineers hate open windows. But now that it's becoming more and more of a conversation. And just to be aware, there are filters that you can put on mechanical systems that like are hospital grade, MERV 12 plus. Those tend to those do well because they're effectively hospital and surgery grade, but they tend to degrade your equipment over a long-term use because the mechanical equipment's working harder to pull the same amount of CFM through to clean the air. So City Hall and Public Works need update to windows and mechanical systems to provide proper protections. Police and fire departments do not have adequately sized spaces for breaks or meeting rooms to maintain social distancing. This is the topic that really got us going on this. And we actually had an interview during the pandemic with a police department, and they specifically asked us what we would do to our designs of the facilities. And what Public Works is doing is they need more break spaces. They don't have enough break spaces as it is right now for their various departments, but they need more break spaces so they could not fit 25 people in a room. They need to be able to spread everyone out. Police, it's really about an operational issue. Every day, the people on shift come in and they go to roll call and they all sit in a room together 3 or 4 feet apart and talk about what are their duties for that day, what do they need to do. You can't get that close and you can't do it inside. So a lot of our facilities that we're designing currently, we're designing outside space, whether that's garage or other, to do those roll calls and those training elements outside. And then water treatment and wastewater really have sufficient space, but it's a bit of a misleading element because there's really very little staff there and there's really very little public interaction. There's only about 3 or 4 people that work at any given time in either of those facilities, and they're kind of big enough because those people also have their one thing that they tend to do. There's a manager, there's a lab tech, there's another person that's managing equipment. But the windows at either of them are really not operable, and therefore the mechanical system has to do all the filtering for it. But particularly at the water treatment, it's kind of well handled for that size. So those are all of the specific recommendations on each building. There is some set of overall recommendations right now. One of them is you should really investigate establishing a centralized management for all of the facilities. What basically happens right now is you have silos. Police handle their building and their issues, Public Work handles their buildings and their issues, and each department kind of has a lead that is addressing those concerns of those issues. And while you might have mechanical systems at 3 different buildings, 3 different people are dealing with that small mechanical issue or that large mechanical issue, as opposed to one person dealing with all the mechanical issues. We recommend, and you guys have already started, creating contracts across buildings to gain efficiencies in costs and warranties. So you already do that with generators and you already do that with elevators. You can do the same thing with roofing, cleaning contracts, almost anything you can think of. You could aggregate that across and you will usually get a much better rate at that. You can establish a regular schedule of addressing, and I know I said earlier there's no delayed maintenance, but that could come up. So if delayed maintenance comes up because you need to of budget issues, establish a schedule that you will address those and a plan to address them. Don't just leave it open. But that consolidated effort allows you to tackle those much more readily. Implement security revisions in each facilities, and again, we're identifying deficiencies, not solutions. And then in the end, on this particular one is the staff is exceptional at their own job, and they do an incredible job of being an HVAC repair tech, somebody to do the bidding, get proposals, evaluate proposals, but that's not their area of expertise. They're very busy doing their job, making sure the city runs effectively and efficiently. Having 3 different people do roofing specs and roofing evaluations is not an effective use of their time. I'm not sitting here advocating for someone like me. You just need to think about it in general. Is that a contract with some HVAC companies? Is that a skilled set of architects or engineers that might work with you? Different ways of handling it, but the opportunity is you get better costs on the work if you're able to aggregate. It's called economy of scale. The more you buy, the cheaper things are. It's like economic kind of 101. So when you're dealing with one unit in the corner, if you can say, hey, I'm going to deal with all of these, you might get a better rate on that. The other thing it kind of aggregates your liability. If you can go with a sole source kind of contract, you know who to call if there's an issue. It's not, well, the police need to call this guy and the public work needs to call that lady and this, that. You know who to call for any of them across the city. And then also, if there's an engineer or an architect involved, you know who you can kind of point fingers and go, solve this problem for me. It's pretty straightforward process, but a lot of municipalities kind of do what you're doing and others look at it, and we find more benefits when you start bringing in outside sources because you're also not paying your staff to work on these issues. They're very, very good at what they do, and generally they should be staying on top of that. So the last slide is next steps. We're going to be issuing, I'm calling it a draft because what we're looking for is to get your guys and your comments either from tonight or as you review the documents, and then we will finalize them. You'll get a packet for each building that goes over the same kind of formatting. So we'll be updating that, and then you'll get that for review, and you can feed comments back to Stephanie as need be. We will then address any comments or feedback, and our next presentation is on October 25th. At that one, we'll discuss what are the financial implications of all of this stuff. What are recommendations of moving forward with the work, and what are your opportunities or what are your options as you look at what to do? Some of them may be ranging from just fix a couple of things and just stay on top of it to there's a certain point where, like your car, you might go, yeah, I got so much to work to do on this car, maybe better I need to get a new car, or save for getting a new car, or something along that lines. And then at that point, that's going to lead into November into your strategic plan methodology. So there's a little bit of a method to the madness here, and it gives you a lot of items to think about and discuss. Again, today I'm not making any specific recommendations. I just hope today that I was able to kind of bring to light the state of the union, as it were, because I know you guys probably don't get an opportunity to go in and out of the buildings and see kind of what's happening in every location. So with that, thank you.
Oh, thanks a bunch, Craig.
Yeah, I know. I'm really a fun guy, I swear.
In all seriousness, thank you for your service to Batavia. I mean it, in the school board.
Yeah, thank you, yes.
My God,
yeah.
that's a, oof,
Right now, it's a bit fun.
I can only imagine, man. Stephanie, is there anything you want to add before I turn it over to the committee members for questions or comments?
No, I think Craig covered it tonight. Really was it's the high-level overview.
Yeah.
You'll get more details when we give you the written reports, and then we'll talk finances in a couple months. But again, we're trying to set the stage like we are with a few things for strategic planning and kind of looking at the next few budget years.
For the committee, I'm going to recognize Alderman Maladra first, but I think it's fair to say that pretty much everything you've presented tonight, Craig, is likely not a surprise. So,
You can kind of assume it was,
but the way you presented it, though, was very helpful. We appreciate
thank
it
you.
very much. So,
yeah.
Alderman Maladra, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I was going to lead off by saying that I don't see a whole lot of surprises here. One question for you, though, and maybe this will come with the draft packet, some indication of priority. I see an awful lot of needs. Some of them, I think, are things we've been living with for years.
Right.
And so I have a hard time understanding how something like that might be a priority, whereas something else might be, raw or more recently exacerbated and therefore a bigger problem. So when you do bring a draft forward, I think that would help.
Yeah, so there's some innate priorities already in it. So there are certain things that we are saying, these are urgent, these are big issues, and these are items that you should address. So there is kind of that level. The real prioritization comes a bit after your strategic plan process, because we need to know where you're going before we can start prioritizing things. Because sometimes what one would do is one would develop a master plan for the community and say, this is what our overarching thing is. Well, why fix things if you're going to do something big and do a renovation of a certain area? Why fix the little things if you can just limp them along for a few years? So that's the next step after that. And right now our scope is to do this and to kind of help identify the costs associated with those elements, almost from a budgeting perspective as you move forward. But that's a good point, and I'll try to address that in once we get everybody's comments. There's another part that you're not going to get yet that is kind of an overarching packet that we'll provide after the October 25th meeting. That I'll address that, and I'll look at it maybe for the 25th and bringing something on.
Okay.
Then.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Alderwoman Ruby?
Thank you. Just two small details. There was an asterisk throughout the presentation. So does that mean like does not apply?
No,
Relevant
if it's
throughout?
white, it usually means does not apply. If it's an asterisk, it just usually means, it's kind of like the Barry Bonds hit all the home runs. There's usually a little modifier there that's like, well, like the guy mentioned on the security side for or the pandemic side for water treatment and wastewater. They meet what one would say is pandemic concerns, but the reason is there's just not enough people there for it to be really a concern, and they've got, by virtue of the space, it's big enough. So there's I don't want you to be misled that's green because everything's hunky-dory, that there's a
Sure.
reason. Like, if all of a sudden things ballooned up and you needed to add 25 people over at wastewater, then you might have a problem.
Okay, so
You know.
the asterisks on the red, yellow, and green boxes translate to irrelevant?
No, they just, let me go
Like
back.
that color is irrelevant?
No, well, it just means something I probably needed to kind of highlight, so maybe in the report.
Okay.
That I'll help explain that a little bit
Okay,
more.
that would be great, because I just wasn't sure there was,
I had a note on here that says explain the asterisks, and I
Yeah.
forgot to do that on it
Okay.
for you.
Well, the night's young, Craig, so go ahead.
Yeah. I've only been
And-
talking an hour.
just one small request for the next round, instead of Fire Station 1 and 2, could you please use east and west? Is
Fair
that-
enough, I can.
Okay, awesome,
Yes.
thank you. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Mayor.
So, my main thing is, we don't have anybody who's on point for a facilities manager role.
Your microphone, Alderman?
We don't have one person that's responsible for facilities in the
For the
city?
citywide, no. So kind of like Craig alluded to, we have one point person in each building. So for instance, Commander Frieders is our police building point person. Eric Nelson is City Hall. I think Nate gets the Public Works facility, and I don't know if you get the other two? Okay. And Chief?
Oh, the fire marshal.
Fire Marshal, Dustin.
Dustin.
But they all have other roles.
So they all have full-time
They have
jobs.
full-time
They're
jobs
hired as something
and-
else, and this is added on to their job responsibilities. Correct.
And then I just wanted to touch base on the police station, the addition, because you said it wasn't built to ADA. Was it
So
at
the
least
di-
built to ADA in
So
2006?
the addition was built to ADA and allows you to get access to the various floors. There are a couple of other intermediaries that you kind of have to hop up and down on. So it met at the time the need to be able to get somebody in a wheelchair or an elevator access between the two floors. And primarily, that's what a lot of that did there. There was other interior renovations. Frankly, the biggest issue at the police station right now is just infrastructure. The generator, there's significant investment in underground plumbing because it's just breaking at a random time frames. So they're doing things like lining the pipes to try to mitigate that as they're looking forward. But there's things lurking in the walls, figuratively and literally there. So,
I heard about those things.
yeah.
So the water towers weren't included,
No.
was the other thing.
No.
Are they in pretty adequate condition? Can we put green on them?
Yeah, they weren't part of the scope of this, so we all know that the Dodson Water Tower was just completely cleaned,
Looks
painted,
beautiful.
put all together, and so they're on kind of their own cycle.
Okay.
Just to also make it clear, because that reminds me, like at water treatment and wastewater, we evaluated the building of themselves, not the piping infrastructure and all the chemicals and all that other stuff. At wastewater, you guys have a plan of action and you're moving forward on that, and water treatment's not old enough to be really of concern about them.
Okay. Do we have any women firefighters yet?
Yes.
And where do they,
They have locations, it's just not large enough as things grow. So like over at Fire Station 2, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, they basically have a changing room and a bathroom that,
That's the west side.
the west side, thank you. Sorry about that, didn't listen. I apologize. So the west side station, correct, Chief, is that about right?
And we currently have 5 women firefighters.
very
And
nice.
we have only 5 lockers at Station 1.
Okay.
The next one, we're short.
Which is
Station-
the east side fire station.
Sorry, east side.
It's not just me.
Yeah, west side fire station, the separations, they can't change in their bunk area. They have to change in the bathroom because there was no provisions made for females at the time.
all
Which
right.
is surprising, it's only 28 years
Yeah,
ago,
it's
but,
not that long ago.
no, but unfortunately, we weren't there at that time, so,
Right.
Thanks, Chief.
sure.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? I was gonna ask, what do you do for fun, Craig, but I'm afraid to ask. It's like,
I go to school board meetings.
oh my.
Marching band. That's what I do for fun.
Do you?
Yeah, my son's in marching band at the high
that's cool.
school. and
What
so-
instrument?
He's a trumpet. He's a section leader. And then I am affectionately referred to, because I do have a sense of humor, the prop czar. I help design and work with a team of parents to construct all their props and push them on and off the fields and orchestrate with that with kids. So
Are all those props made in such a way that the lifespan is significant, or you just kind of,
oh, we're just trying to get through one season at a time.
how
There
ironic?
have been a few on the
How
last
ironic.
day. They've fallen apart as we left, which is perfect because then we don't put them back in the trash cans
There you go.
at the buildings.
The floor is open to any member of the committee. Alderman
Just a
Marks.
quick question. Do you know when to anticipate seeing these reports, so we'll have time
It's
for the 25th?
approximately 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, so.
We're not,
we'll have
our
plenty
goal
of
is to
time.
give it to you in time so they have some time to read them because they are fascinating to read before the October meeting and to get a chance to have dialogue with Stephanie or
With
others. as
Stephanie,
needed.
okay. Stephanie, is there a possibility when we go through these that we can meet in groups to discuss it with you? Or is that really not what you want? Because,
I mean, I think we can do whatever is the council's pleasure. Sometimes I feel though it's beneficial for everybody to get the same information,
Yeah.
but again, once you have a chance to read through the
Might have a
reports,
better-
it might give you a better idea of where we're at.
yeah, that's kind of why I was asking. You might have an idea. Thank you.
Are there going to be sorry,
Well, you're
will
on.
there be plans in these reports, at least like base level plans of the building?
Not really. I can probably work on pulling that together. It might take me a little past the week. I mean, we have them. I just need to clean them up a little bit.
Just like diagrammatic?
Yeah, I can
would
get you
be
something.
Fine.
Let me check with each department, make sure they're comfortable releasing them, but I will talk about that.
Alderman Kasserag.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say I'm like overwhelmed with the state of affairs here, and not just because of your doom and gloom attitude tonight, but I mean, I think it's something that I've noticed, not just since an alderman, but since living in Geneva. And it's just, I'm feeling very overwhelmed right now. And I guess, somewhat anxious to get this sort of cleaned up somehow or another, whether it's a facilities plan or whatever we might decide going forward. It seems clear something needs to be done, so I guess I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. So, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Craig, if I may, since no one else is asked to be recognized, you have a great many metrics on here. There's one that, unless I missed it, is there any metric that you are currently providing or have been asked to provide with other clients with respect to environmental stewardship?
Not particularly. We have a lot of discussions when we're doing new work. I literally just presented to the Village of Woodridge as
Okay,
we're
got
doing
it.
a new police
And that's
station
the-
of what
that's
we
the
do with
next
that.
sta- that's down the road.
Yeah,
Yep, got it.
we do, what sometimes happens is like, okay, we say, municipalities not so much because of some of the electrical kind of agreements that have of what can we do to reduce our electrical. So like a lot of our schools, we do West Aurora, we're putting solar panels all over the place on West Aurora school districts
Right,
right now.
right.
Because they can use that offset and rates to pay for their roofs.
Right.
So that's an after the fact. But we can certainly do evaluations. I mean, we're adding geothermal we've done 75 buildings of geothermal.
And for those who aren't aware, there's geothermal at the library.
Yep, geothermal at the library.
And how many tanks are under there?
So there's 45 wells and there's 39 heat pump units in the building,
Is that amazing or what?
which has actually worked very well with the pandemic. So when you have a centralized system, all the air is going through one unit,
Got it.
right? They have a bunch of small ones. So when you're in the children's area, it's only circulating the children's air in that area. It's not spreading it across the rest of the building.
The pervious pavers we put at the water treatment center is a perfect example of,
Yeah. The amazing thing with that one, from her perspective, I asked her to compare from the old building to the new building, her electrical bills. She said they're about the same.
no kidding.
Yeah, and that building's about twice as big as the old one.
That's amazing. Okay. Anyone else?
Well, thank you very much. I do want to say I appreciate everybody on the team. They all worked very hard at getting me the information and giving us access and letting us.
And Craig, I was going to ask too, if any department head wishes to make any comment, by all means, the floor is open, so it's a relatively casual,
Get anything?
so,
And I covered almost everything? Okay.
And I think all of us on this dais understand the multiple roles all of you play, particularly when emergencies strike. And I don't mean emergencies like storm damage, but just, leaky
Yeah.
walls or little critters living inside walls or whatever the case may be, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Craig, if you could please use the back door when you leave here, that'd be helpful.
I don't know, there's no camera, I can't see who's waiting for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. New business, ladies and gentlemen, from the dais. Anyone have any new business for the benefit of this council and community? Alderman Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to bring the city council up to speed with an issue that we've been having in the Fifth Ward with regard to right-of-way encroachments, and request that staff provide an update to the city council with what exactly our policy is. So just to give you a background, obviously we all know that Geneva is a historical community. We have a lot of buildings that have been accumulated over time, going back to 1838, and comply with zoning as they existed over time. And during that time period, zoning has changed, and we have various problems, be it setbacks or right-of-way issues. This year has been interesting because we've had 2 right-of-way encroachment issues that have come before us. One, we addressed it in April, and we entered into an agreement with the birdhouse lady on James Street, which where they're rebuilding an entryway that was in the right-of-way on James Street. And to do that, we allowed for insurance and liability and maintenance to be handled for a 20-year period. So life was good, and they were able to proceed with their request. Subsequently, a few weeks ago, we had a resident in the Fifth Ward want to redo a porch entryway that encroached the right-of-way by 12 inches. This has been there, it's a 1925 house. They've owned it since 1984. They wanted to redo the wood structure, and they were denied a building permit. Unfortunately, we did not offer them the option to be able to replace it as is, kind of in a grandfathered state. So I guess the questions I have that I would like addressed to the city council is, number one, does Geneva have a no exception policy with respect to grandfathered structures when they want to redo them? In the case of the resident that I mentioned, they came before the building department. They wanted to do everything according to code, and then were denied the building permit. So they were trying to do everything right, yet still couldn't proceed with their building as they've enjoyed since 1984. Question number 2, can accommodations be made so that people that have a grandfathered structure can continue to enjoy it or replace it or rebuild it as it starts to wear out, so they have access to it in the future? And if we are going to make an accommodation, I understand that we have to look at the right-of-way. Say, is the building on top of a sewer line or something like that? Then we can say no, but can we look at them on an individual basis in order to be more accommodating to our residents? Number 3, does the city have an inventory of existing row encroachments so that we can forewarn people that their enjoyment of what they have right now may be temporary? If they have a porchway that has an encroachment, they may not be able to rebuild that when the wood starts to rot. So I would like kind of a no surprises policy going forward. And finally, number 4, what is the recourse that residents have when they're pursuing a building permit and they're denied? And the reason I ask that is, had this gone before the Planning and Zoning Commission and they were denied, the recourse is to come to us, and then we can override the PZC. In this case, they were denied a building permit, and I'm not sure what their next options are. So I would like someone to provide that information to the city council so we know for the next time this happens what our options are. So that's my request for a future meeting, hopefully soon.
You're talking a policy discussion meeting regarding this, or do you just want staff to provide that information?
Well,
for-
actually, both. And if we have a no exception policy, I'd like to know why, and if we could perhaps make accommodations for people.
With respect to the policy discussion meeting, I would open that up just as an informal discussion and just seek consensus from this committee to do exactly that. Alderman Maladra?
Informal discussion about whether or not we should have a policy
Correct,
discussion
correct.
about
I
it?
just want to make certain that there's the majority of the folks who say yes. If there's no interest, there's no interest.
Okay. I'd be interested.
Okay. Anyone not interested? How's that? Put it that way. Okay. I simply can't address the other issue with respect to a report with the 4 pillars that you identified, but I don't know if anyone can, but we'll certainly look into it. Yeah.
And I don't know how quickly. I mean, are you looking for a policy discussion in 2 weeks? Are you looking?
I would
I mean,
prefer in 2 weeks.
We'd have to get the
You-
materials
there's-
together first to
There's a lot of
have that discussion.
information
Understood.
that you're asking for that I don't know that that's feasible, given the demands that are going in the department right now, so.
Understood. And at a minimum, I think it would be nice to offer the residents, we came back and said they don't have options. I would like to confirm that they don't have options to pursue rebuilding their entryway as is in a grandfathered status, 12 inches above the right-of-way. That's the most imminent timing issue.
I think that
Is this a
question was
residential?
asked and
Yeah.
answered.
Is it a residential issue in
It
your
is.
opinion, or is it a residential and a commercial, depending on what we discover?
It's completely residential.
So-
But I would be interested in both, just so we know going forward what to expect or how we address it.
Because the 2 examples you gave was one residential, one
That's true.
commercial.
That's
And
very
I
true.
do believe that you did meet with
Yes, I
Public
did.
Works Director and Community Development Director and the City Attorney, and were given that there are options. No, they cannot rebuild in the right-of-way, but there are options for them. And they
Yes,
were
that's true.
provided that same information.
And the question I have is, given that we provided options to a commercial enterprise, are we saying that there is no way we would do that for a residence?
I guess we're mincing words, but they were provided options, but just not to rebuild within the right-of-way.
That's correct, and I'm saying, could they rebuild on the right-of-way if they entered into some agreement similar to what we did with the birdhouse lady, which was a commercial enterprise?
The city attorney's not here. The city attorney opined on that with you, and so I don't know how we provide different information than what has already been provided.
And I think that's a policy discussion that this group should make, given that we have 2 very different scenarios that have played out for the exact same thing, other than one is commercial and one is residential.
There's more differences than just.
Understood.
Than
I'm
what you're
I'm sim-
making it, but I think tonight is not the appropriate time to be discussing it.
Yep, okay.
So we'll get back to you with an ETA based on the information requested. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, Alderwoman Ruby, excuse me.
Thank you. I just have a question related to Alderman Swanson's comments. How is this resident situation different than, I feel like it was just a few weeks ago that we approved replacement of a deck for another resident that was not to code, but because it was an exact replacement.
No, that one, again, I think that's why this is not the appropriate time, but that one was not in the city right-of-way. The 2 examples that Alderman Swanson is giving have to do with encroachments in the right-of-way. The deck was not in a right-of-way. It had to do with variances for setback.
Okay.
And so they went through the zoning procedure that is in place to grant those types of variances.
Thank you.
Anyone else? New business? Alderman Marks?
Easy question,
Or
Kevin.
old business?
No, it's a question to clarify a comment you made earlier. Where is that wreath laying ceremony tomorrow
It's at
night?
the American Legion.
It is there, okay, it's not like down at the county.
Correct.
That's why I wanted to check. Okay,
If it's
thank you.
different, I'll text you, but
Okay,
I was advised by a
Okay.
text via the Legion.
I just wanted to verify that,
Yeah.
so that people know that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Alderwoman Burkhart.
Thank you. I just wanted to say what Alderman Swanson's talking about. I would definitely support a policy discussion. It's obviously an important issue and complex one in a historic town where people are always looking to improve their properties and sometimes end up, it seems like in this case, maybe with a surprise or you know, what was built almost 100 years ago, and then you try to improve it today and suddenly you really hit a brick wall. So I am eager to talk more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Kilburg?
Just as a side note, former Alderman Ron Singer served on the council for a number of years, has had some health challenges. And I'm sure if you have an opportunity, maybe a card to Ron would be appreciated. He's having a little bit of a difficult time right now, so something to consider. Thank you.
Anyone else? Very well. I will entertain a motion to adjourn, or excuse me, to go into closed session for, forgive me, discussion on the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Alderman Bruno made the motion, Alderman Marks made the second. Roll call vote. Whenever you're ready.
Bruno?
Aye.
Berghart?
Aye.
Ruby? Aye. Caven?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Kosarog?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
Mayor?
Aye.
Swanson?
Aye.
This is, of course, regarding the acquisition of the new St. Charles Police Station, so everybody please leave the room. We're going to ask you kindly to enjoy your evening. Thank you. Again, Craig, thank you very much. And no action is being taken tonight, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know. We will be ending our virtual participation as well in just a moment, so thank you for joining us.